So you don't need to be hearing that. And also, I think it's a good idea if you're going to ask questions, you can feel free to put something in the chat if you like, or you can use the hands up function. And maybe what we'll do is we'll wait until our speakers have said their say, and then we can get into a little Q&A with them, and then they're in and out. So I think that'd be a good way to go. So I think most of the people here know me, but I'll introduce myself. I'm Trevor, National Recruitment Advisor, and another National Recruitment Advisor on the call, Carly Glantz, and she'll be putting stuff. You want to say hi, Carly?
Hi, everyone. Good morning.
And Carly is off camera, and she's working the chat and putting up some links and things like that. So she's monitoring that because I can only walk and chew bubblegum for so long. So before we dive into the agenda and the program, I just wanted to first and foremost to welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us this morning. Got a nice group of counselors once again, and I can see the people are still filing in, which is amazing. And before we start, I just wanted to do a quick land acknowledgement. And let me start by saying that Carleton University acknowledges the location of its campus on the traditional unceded territories of the Algonquin Nation. So for the agenda today, we were sort of talking about it a little bit loosely here before we got going, is we have a sponsor for the Faculty of Public Affairs, and we have a guest from the Paul Menton Center. And essentially, we're going to introduce our sponsor, Mark, and he's going to speak, and then and introduce Amanda, and she's going to speak, and then we have the rest of the time for our fabulous Director of Admissions, Jen Sugar, to speak all things admissions and to get your questions answered. That's kind of how we'll roll. So introduction, I should say, of our speakers. We're pleased to be joined by our guest speaker, Amanda Blais, who is the Disabilities Coordinator and Learning Strategist with the Paul Menton Center. Hello, Amanda. She's waving. Good job. As well as our sponsor for the forum today, the Faculty of Public Affairs. It's going to be represented by Mark Hanvelt. Mark is Professor of Political Science at Carleton and Associate Dean, Students and Enrollment in the Faculty of Public Affairs. So welcome, Mark. Yeah, and also, as I'd mentioned before, we're pleased to be joined by Jen Sugar, our Director of Admissions, and lots of people know Jen, and she's waving. Thank you for that, and welcome to you three for joining us today. I want to talk about the schedule of events before I pass it over to our sponsor from the Faculty of Public Affairs. Sort of the schedule of events that are going on for these guidance forums in the next few weeks. We have next week, the 6th, will be our sponsor will be the Faculty of Art and Social Sciences, and our guest will be Awards and Financial Aid. The week after, on the 13th, we'll have our sponsor be the Faculty of Engineering and Design, and that will also be featuring there as the guests 3 professors that are going to talk about portfolio programs such as architecture, industrial design, and the interactive multimedia design with Bachelor of Information Technology. So that'll be a good toolkit session to get tips and tricks to pass on to the students in terms of how to accomplish and mount those important portfolios for getting into those programs. And then we'll wrap up the guidance forums for this fall on the 27th. We'll take a break, 16th and 20th, and then the 27th, we will feature science as well as housing and residence life services. So I'd also mentioned to the sponsors that are not in the lead role presenting as Mark is today, that they're able to share news in off weeks if they wish. And the Faculty of Engineering Design has wanted me to relay that each week they will be updating the webpage that Carly is going to put in the chat with a lot of upcoming events and resources for teaching and for teachers and students going forward. So check that out, bookmark that, and if you have students that are interested in engineering design, absolutely check that out. Also in the chat, we have Rhonda Kelly is saying hello, and she's from the Sprott School of Business. If you had any questions for her, you can have that little conversation in there or connect with her there. All right, so without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to our sponsor, Mark Hanvelt from the Faculty of Public Affairs, and the floor is yours, Mark.
get myself unmuted there. Thanks, Trevor, and thanks to everybody for joining us this morning, virtually, I suppose. As Trevor says, my name is Mark Hanvelt. I'm Associate Dean of Students and Enrollment in the Faculty of Public Affairs, and when I'm not playing the role of Associate Dean, I'm a professor in the Department of Political Science. So I was just going to talk to you very briefly about our faculty, about the Faculty of Public Affairs, and to let you know about a few events that we have coming up. The programs in our faculty focus specifically on government and civil society, and were created really to address the policies of private, governmental, and non-governmental sectors. Our faculty educates a large number of Canada's public servants. And what really connects the different units in our faculty is a shared focus on fostering informed citizenship and building better societies. We have a wide range of undergraduate degree programs. They cover areas including public affairs and policy management, criminology and criminal justice, economics, journalism, communication and media studies, law and legal studies, political science, social work. We also have within the Faculty of Public Affairs the Bachelor of Global and International Studies, which is also known as BEGINS. This is a unique program that provides students with sort of a multidisciplinary and an international experience. The program has both a second language and an international experience component, and experiential learning features very prominently. It's a key feature of the student experience in BEGINS. BEGINS incorporates 18 different specializations, and students can choose to focus their studies on regional themes such as Africa and globalization, or Europe, Russia, and the world, Latin American and Caribbean studies. They can also choose thematic specializations, so development, literature, religions of the world, the environment, gender and sexuality, law and social justice, economic policy, that sort of thing. BEGINS has a stream in global migration and transnationalism, which I think is worth noting. And courses in this stream are offered through our Migration and Diaspora Studies program in FPA, which is an interdisciplinary graduate program. And FPA, I think, is really lucky to count amongst its faculty some truly leading scholars in the field of migration. I also wanted to point out our School of Journalism and Communication is offering a new undergraduate minor in news, media, and information. And this program is open to all undergraduate degree students in programs other than journalism. Some of the programs in FPA and our faculty offer accelerated graduate pathways. And so these are pathways that provide sort of flexible and individualized plans that lead to specific graduate programs. For most of these pathways, students are able to take graduate level credits completed in the final year of their undergraduate studies that are then transferable into their graduate program. So for example, students in the Bachelor of Public Affairs and Policy Management program can use transfer credits towards Carleton graduate programs in political management, public policy and administration, international affairs, European, Russian, and Eurasian studies. If you have any questions at all about the programs in the Faculty of Public Affairs, please visit our website, which is carleton.ca/FPA. You can also, of course, speak with the wonderful people in admissions. I wanted to just know about two events that we have coming up, really sets of events, actually. We have our open house coming up on November the 7th. And then later in November, we're going to host a series of virtual lounges where prospective students will have the opportunity to meet with a faculty member teaching a first-year course, one or more of our Fpa ambassadors, and these are student ambassadors from our Fpa programs. And these are going to be sort of lounges that are focused on specific programs within Fpa. So prospective students will be able to choose a lounge from a program that they're particularly interested in. And the lounges will really focus on the student experience in these programs in an FPA. Now, information about these virtual lounges and registration information about that will be available on Carlton 360, the Carlton 360 website, and will also be available on the admissions website. So that's about all I have to say to you today. Thank you very much for joining us, and thank you very much, Trevor, for having us here.
Thank you very much, Mark. Very informative indeed, and we appreciate you joining us this morning to share that news. A lot of people have been filing in. We've got a good crowd here. So for those of you that might have joined us in midstream here, just letting you know that we're joined by our sponsor from the Faculty of Public Affairs, Professor and Associate Dean Mark Henvelt, who just gave us his update. Now's an opportunity if you wanted to raise a hand or put a question in the meeting chat for Mark. We'll take a couple minutes to consider that if you wish. Before we introduce our guest speaker, and then we'll move on to the Director of Admissions, Jen Sugar, and our guest speaker today is a Disabilities Coordinator and Learning Strategist with the Paul Menton Center. So just very briefly, anyone want to put their hand up, ask a question of Mark before we move on? We will continue to track the chat. Carly's in the background here. I'm going to keep an eye on that. And if there's any questions, you can put them there or raise your hand. If not, Mark will sift off into doing what he does on Fridays. And certainly Mark will forward any questions or contacts if someone needs to talk to you as well. So once again, thank you for joining us. Okay, and without further ado, we're going to pass it over to Amanda. Thanks for joining us, Amanda.
No problem. Thanks for having me, Trevor. And hello to everyone out in cyber world at the moment. I will say that I have lots of students who are in public affairs who absolutely love their program. So it was great to be able to hear from Mark and hear all the new things that are happening there. So today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the Paul Menton Center for Students with Disabilities here on campus. And I'll be talking to you a little bit about how to register or how students can go about registering with the Paul Menton Center, or how we like to call it the PMC. Everything in university is abbreviated, just so everyone's aware. And then we'll talk a little bit about the accommodation process and what that looks like. And I'll also give you some information about other services that we offer through the PMC. If you've got questions throughout, please do put them in the chat or raise your hand. I'm happy to stop in the middle of everything to let you know some things. And so I'll just get started. So the PMC was founded in the 80s and has slowly helped Carleton to become one of the most accessible universities in the country, mainly because of our tunnel system. And what we do predominantly is provide academic accommodations and services to students so they can have access to information in their classrooms and also have an equitable way to partake in their tests and exams and things throughout school. What's interesting is that we have over 3,500 students registered with the center. So our student population who have identified themselves with us makes up about 10% of the overall Carleton population, which often surprises a lot of people. And about 90% of the students that register with PMC have invisible disabilities. So our largest categories of students that register with us are students with mental health disabilities, ADHD, and learning disabilities. We also have a fairly large population of students on the spectrum with autism spectrum disorder in the high functioning range. And so we actually have a population of students in that category that kind of rival what you would see at college. So we do have a lot of supports for students to help them with transitioning. For those of you from the Ottawa area might have taken part in our Make the Cut programming, which we are going to be holding online again this fall. But again, we do try to provide as many supports as we can for all students who identify as having a disability. And that's the big message I'll be putting through. As you know, your students, IEPs will not be following them to university. They actually have to identify themselves with us. So it's really important to send the message to them that as soon as they get their acceptance to Carleton, that they can register with us. We have a lot of students and we encourage a lot of students actually to register with us in the summer. That way, if they need updated documentation or need to purchase any type of software or technology, we can help them through that process before it gets super busy in September. Then I just want to talk to you a little bit about our spaces on campus. So right now there's really no one on campus at the moment. The only space that's open is our Joy McLaren Center that's housed in the library. And the Joy McLaren Center is specifically for students with disabilities, and they have designated private where students can access technology, kind of work on their own in the library, and that is still open to students at the moment. Everything else is being done remotely. So some of the services we'll be talking about, students can still access at home. So how students register with us. So it's a good idea if students have questions, or if you've got questions, you can always book an information session with us. And you can do that by emailing pmc@carleton.ca or calling our main number. I'll just put it in the chat there. And we'd be happy to meet with you or your students to just give you an overview of what can be expected. On our website at pmc@carleton.ca, we also have a how to register with us tab. In that tab, you'll have information regarding what types of documentation students will need. There'll also be information about various events we would be hosting for information sessions, things like that. So definitely encourage your students to check that out so that they can figure out what it is they need to come and see us. So, sorry, I'm going to be stopping there a little bit. So one of the ways that we implement accommodations once students get to Carleton is when they complete their intake with us, we then review with them all the courses that they're going to be taking in that term and what types of accommodations they could need for those courses. With this new online platform, we have really seen a change in the type of accommodations that are being requested. Predominantly, the accommodation we're offering right now is extra time for exams and tests, and those are only for timed same-day tests. One of the things that we like to tell students is that we do not provide assignment extensions as accommodation. Instead, what we really encourage students to do is take advantage of working with our one-on-one with our learning strategists that we have in-house. As Trevor said, I am, in addition to being a disabilities counselor, I'm also a learning strategist, and we have about 10 learning strategists in-house as well. And we work with students on anything from active reading strategies, note-taking strategies, study strategies. So we really do try to meet the individualized needs of each student. That being said, when it comes to the actually implementing the accommodations, the way that we do it is we provide a letter of accommodations to the students' professors so they know exactly what the student has requested for accommodations. Again, that only happens after they've come in and done their intake with us. With regards to confidentiality, we cannot disclose the nature of the student's disability to anyone on campus without their written consent, or unless we feel they're at risk of hurting themselves, someone else, or subpoenaed to by law. So that's just some information about how students register with us. And I've already mentioned one of the student services that we offer most frequently, which is our Learning Strategies program. We also have disability-specific counseling in-house. So our counselors will work with students to identify solution-focused type counseling as opposed to psychotherapy with students. And our students really work, our counselors really work with students to help them address how their disabilities directly impacting their academics. So the students can work with both a disabilities counselor and a learning strategist at the same time if they want. Everything is completely free or included with their tuition when they register with the center. We also offer a volunteer note-taking service. It's one of our biggest services on campus, and we have a volunteer note taker in virtually every classroom on campus. So we always talk about a culture of accessibility here at Carleton, and a lot of that culture was founded through our students, or Carleton students in general, just feeling the obligation to help their peers and provide their own notes to students who need them. So it's been pretty awesome to see that. We also offer sign language interpreting for any students that might need access to that service. We have a closed captioning service for students as well if they need that. Now, again, with a lot of the online platform and things being recorded, there are capabilities for closed captioning to be incorporated in classes already. And we do talk to students a lot about potential funding that they could have access to. So another reason for students to register with us early is so that we can go over with them how to apply for that funding so that they can have access to it to purchase the things that they need while they're at university. So that is my very quick overview of the things that we do at PMC. Does anybody want me to review any of that content again or have questions about some of the things that I covered?
Okay, so we have the opportunity. Looks like Carolyn Turner has a question. If you can see it in the chat, or we can read it for you.
Okay, so Carolyn's asking here, could you talk about testing? If students testing psychoed is not up to date, is that an issue? Can they access testing at Carleton for free? All very good questions. So we only require updated psychoeducational assessments for students with learning disabilities. Again, and the student has to have a diagnosed learning disability. It can't be unidentified. And we require that students have done testing within the last 3 to 5 years or using adult measures. So all that information is on our website underneath our documentation forms there. And we do have one specifically that outlines what you would require for students with learning disabilities. Now, that being said, if a student does not have updated documentation and they're graduating soon, still send them our way and we can help walk them through the steps of getting the update. Unfortunately, we do not provide testing at Carleton or free testing, but like I said before, when it comes to funding, we can help them figure out ways to either get funding through their insurance or through OSAP grants and things like that. So like I said, best course of action is always to have them do an info session with us or register with us, and then we can walk them through those steps. The big thing is, though, making sure that the student actually has a documented disability, because in the past, we have seen students with unidentified disabilities or don't actually have a diagnosis who've been accommodated in high school that find their way to us, and then we have to connect them with other services on campus, which is totally fine. And one of the big ones we tend to connect students with is Fpa, so from intention to action. And that is a program where students can work one-on-one with a counselor for 12 weeks to help them acclimate with the new setting within post-secondary. I hope that answered your question.
Anyone else has any questions, they can feel free. Carolyn says thank you, so that worked. And if anybody has any questions, they want to raise their hand, we can do it that way, or you can throw a question into the chat. We thought this would be a really good idea to have Amanda on, because we had asked for feedback from the counselors about some of the things they wanted to know about, but mostly from a toolbox perspective and exactly what you just spoke to, Amanda. And thank you, Carly, for putting the link to the documentation forms. It's kind of, you get to this point, I think, for the counselors, it's hard to keep track of, all the documentation and processes and timelines. So I hope that was helpful. If any questions do pop up over the, in the course of the hour and somebody wants to put them in the chat, I know Amanda will probably sift off to do all the great things that she was just talking about, and there's no shortage of work to do. We'd be happy to connect those questions to Amanda later. So thank you very much, Amanda, for joining us this morning. We appreciate it.
No problem. It was a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much.
Okay, so we have something like, I want to say 25 counselors or so, which has been a really good turnout. And we heard from Mark Hanvelt from Faculty of Public Affairs, and we just heard from Amanda from the Paul Menton Center. Thank you very much for joining us. I want to take 2 seconds just to promote a couple things that are upcoming. Next week is a pretty huge week for us. We're doing all kinds of great things. Wednesday, we're going to do a session with at the, can't remember his name, Stanley. Hi, Stanley. Is going to do it live at 5 next Wednesday, and it's going to be focusing on the Parliamentary Page Program. So I think that'd be a really cool thing for you and or your students to check out. Hey, Stanley, what's going on? And Stanley's got his Friday Spirit Wear on. I'll set to go for that. Stanley is also on Spotify, the Talking Raven. So that's something to check out. Next week will be huge as well, because we do We do Faculty of Arts and Social Science Spotlights, which we'll be doing today. And we're evolving out different majors in the program. So today we'll be doing childhood and youth studies, human rights and social justice, and women and gender studies programs. So that's gonna be super popular today at 4. If you feel like promoting that, that would be amazing. But next week is going to be big again, because we're also doing on this forum, we're going to have the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences will be the sponsor, and they're going to be joined by awards and financial aid. So there's a couple of huge hitters for the forum next week if you can join us. And then the Saturday the 7th will be our second virtual open house, where we'll have arts and social sciences, public affairs, and science. We held our first virtual open house, and never really did it before. So you wonder if it's going to work. There were hundreds and hundreds of people who came, so it worked out very, very well. And if you did anything to promote that, we really appreciate that. Okay, so moving forward with the program, just wanted to mention real quick, if you're joining us, to please put your microphones on mute. As much fun as it is to listen to what's happening in your school in the background and bells and dogs barking at home, if you could stay muted, that'd be amazing. So now I'm going to bring on the Jen Sugar, our Director of Admissions, to talk about some admissions related topics. I have a grade 12 student in my home that's going through this year. This is a very unusual year. So thank you very much, Jen, for joining us again.
Thanks, Trevor. Actually, so what I'm going to do this morning is I'm going to go through a few things that I think are really important at this time for guidance counselors to know. And I'm going to sort of base my remarks off a lot of the questions that we're getting from guidance counselors and a lot of the questions that we're getting from students. But before I start, I actually see that Jennifer from John McRae is on the call. And Jennifer, maybe if you can just give me a wave, or like, just put your video on for a second. I was hoping to use your question to me as an example, and I just wanted to get a thumbs up whether that was okay or not. And if not, then I can just address your question individually at the end. So maybe you can pop something in the chat or give me a thumbs up or something as I start talking here. So what I want to do is I want to talk a little bit about timing, because I think that is one of the major things that has changed for this year. And I think it's one of the things in terms of timing of offers and in terms of the grades that we're getting and how we're going to be making offers. We find that that's one of the major questions that we're getting from students. Thank you, Jennifer. I appreciate that. I see that in the chat. And so in terms of timing, basically what's going to happen this year is it will be a little bit different. Your grade 12 students might not know that it's going to be a little bit different because they've never been through this process before, but you'll know because most of you have been through this process before. So the way it's going to work is that we're going to get grades in rounds as we always have, but it'll be a little bit different this coming year just because of the quadmester and the octomester system. So for those of you who've done this before, you know that if your students would have applied to us in November or December, the only grades that we would have had for them at that point would have been grade 11 grades. And if we would have made them a very, very early offer all the way up until February, it would have been based only on grade 11 grades. But what we know this year, because of the octomester and the quadmester system, is that in that November grade distribution, so when we get grades from the Ontario University Application Centre in November, we're going to have those first 2 completed grade 12 grades. And so what that means is that when we start making offers, we're already going to have some of those grade 12 grades. And so even those first offers are going to be a combination of grade 12 and grade 11 grades. And what we're going to do is we're going to use the grade 12 grades that we have. We're going to look at registration in the rest of the grade 12 courses for the year. And anything that we're looking for a prerequisite that we don't quite have yet, we're going to dip back to the grade 11 courses and pull those courses forward preferentially in order to cover any prerequisites that we need. But what that means is that So that's part of what's different. What's the same is that we're going to be getting grades in rounds. So we're going to be getting grades for your students in November, again in February, one more time in April, and then at the end of the year. And what that means for us is that every time we get grades, we're going to pull those grades in, we're going to use those, we're going to recalculate the average, we're going to compare the average that we have for the student with the average that we happen to be using at the time. We're going to check the prerequisites, and then as soon as we can make them an offer, we will. And so we're still going to be doing rolling offers of admission, which is what we've always done. And we're still going to be using a combination of grade 11 and grade 12, which for the most part is what we have always done. What will be different is that we will be using a combination of grade 11 and grade 12 grades for the whole cycle, really. So again, for those of you who have done this before, you know that in the past, by the time we get grades in April, we're pretty much done with using in a normal year, we would have been done with using grade 11 grades. But because of the way the grades are going to be coming in this year, we're still going to be pulling back and looking back and pulling forward some of those grade 12 grades until we get those last two courses at the end of the year. And so really for the majority of the cycle, the offers will be based on a combination of grade 11 and grade 12, but they will be based on different ratios of grade 11 and grade 12. So for the first part of the year, there'll be quite a few grade 11s in there. As we work toward the end of the year, there'll be fewer and fewer grade 11 courses included in the average. So that's really what we're looking for in terms of timing. And this is where I want to grab Jennifer's question that she asked me yesterday. And what she said is that her student has two courses coming in that will be grade 12 marks. And one of those grades isn't as high as some of those grade 11 courses. And so he's sort of fixated on having on not having that grade included in that first average and wants us to use only grade 11s. But what that student needs to remember is that even though we'll be using those grade 12 grades, we're going to be reassessing students' averages again in February and then again in April for scholarship, as we have always done. And so we've always, even if we've given a student an early offer of admission, we've always reassessed them for scholarship. And then if at a later point they're eligible for a higher scholarship, we give it to them. And they'll get an updated letter saying, hey, your average went up and your scholarship went up, and here's your new scholarship value. So students don't need to worry that they're going to be disadvantaged at that early stage, because we will be recalculating those averages for scholarship purposes. Bear with me. I'm just reading a question in the chat because it's sort of the same thing, or sorry, similar thing about calculating averages. So actually, Jeffrey, maybe if you could unmute and just kind of describe this to me, because I'm not sure what the H and the C courses are. So I'll just wait for you to unmute and then maybe give me a bit more detail here.
Good morning. Good morning.
Hi.
So basically, those H's are her humanities courses, and then
Okay.
sort of like the senior law courses, for example, or the history courses are all coded with C's. So my point being that she doesn't have any sort of the traditional math science. They're all based in sort of the humanities or social sciences world or English world.
Yeah.
So she's concerned that because she doesn't have any math science courses, that this may disadvantage her in some way.
Oh, no, not at all. This is a good, good question. And I think sometimes that's a conversation that students end up having with their parents, and their parents make that rule up for them. And they tell them that, that they have to take math and science in order to be looked at preferentially. No, we're looking for a student coming into political science. We're looking at best 6, including prerequisites. And so the English would be the only prerequisite. And so as long as the English is at the U level, then the remaining 5 can be U or M, and we don't weight those differently in any way. Does that answer your question?
Perfect, thank you. Just the
Awesome.
second The second part was, does Carleton weight U level courses and M level courses the same?
We do, yeah. Yeah, we consider them the same. The only time we grab a U level course preferentially is when we need it as a prerequisite, because of course all of our prerequisite courses, if there's a prerequisite for a program, it has to be at the U level. So that's the only preference that we give to U level courses. Other than that, we consider them equivalent. Okay. And Jennifer, that's a good question. We actually don't know the answer to your question. The question was, will you be recalculating averages for scholarships when you receive the quadmester 4 final grades in July? We're having those conversations right now. And because I haven't gotten the 100,000% go ahead, I can't say 100% yes. But those are the way the conversations are leaning, but we haven't finished that conversation yet. And so we'll be able to communicate that as soon as we have that information. I can guarantee that we'll be up until April for sure, and then we'll communicate a little bit better once we have that last decision about July. Okay, so the other thing that I wanted to touch on is I wanted just to touch a little bit on averages, because I think that's a conversation, or that's a question that we're getting a lot this year. So when you look at the updated view book, the 2021 view book, you'll see that in those back pages, which are the pages that are most relevant for admissions, there's the chart, the program chart that has all of the different programs, and it has the averages that students need to shoot for in order to apply. And so I think, there's always, every year, there's always anxiety from students about, do I have the average that I need to apply? Do I have the average that I need to get in? And so what you'll see that we've done is, when you look at the chart, you'll see that there's sort of 2 columns of averages. There's one that says minimum cutoff range. And that's the average range that they should look at if they're trying to figure out, do I have the average that I need to apply to this program? If they look at that column and their average is in that range, then the answer to them is yes, they have the average that they need to apply to that program. What we've also done is we've included the 2019 incoming class average, just to give students an idea of the relative strength of the pool of people that are coming into the program. And so that gives you an idea of, this is the average admission average for the students coming into the program. And so then you can get a good idea of how strong the overall pool is, and who the typical student is coming into that program. But basically what I normally say to students is that if you look at that minimum cutoff range, and the average, let's say, is from 85 to 88 or 82 to 85 or something, at this point, at the beginning of the year, shoot for the top of that average. And if you're shooting for the top of that average, you're mostly going to be okay in terms of being admitted to the program. And that gives them something to kind of put their eyes on in the future, something to kind of look at, and then they can they can have that in their mind as something, as a goal really to shoot for this year. One of the questions that we get from students is, what if I do badly this year? And that question frankly is happening this year because of COVID, but it happens every year. Students at the beginning of the year are always concerned that they're going to do poorly, and they sometimes get themselves fixated or obsessed with, what if I do badly and it's still only September or October? And so what we're saying to students is, do your best. Do your best, do the best that you can. We know that you are there for them. We know that the teachers in the schools are doing their best to help students adapt to this new type of learning and help them get the content that they need and help them get through their classes. And so what we're saying to students is, use those resources. Use the resources that your teachers are providing you, and use the help that you have from your guidance community, and do your best throughout the cycle. And that's really the message that we're giving them right now. And so, and actually, yes, to answer Carolyn's question in the chat, for the initial average calculation, are you using 6 marks, grade 11 and grade 12 combo? Yes. So for that initial average calculation, we're going to use the 2 grade 12s that we have, that we get in November, and then we're going to backfill with 4 grade 11, which, because we have those courses, I think it should help sort of mitigate some some of the average fluctuation that we have, and so I think it'll probably advantage students in most cases. And the last thing that I'm going to try to do, just touch on before we go to questions and address anyone's individual questions is what our approach for this year is. And our approach is what we're trying to do, and this is not just Carleton, this is at a sector-wide level. When I meet with my colleagues, the other directors of admission across Ontario, what we're trying to do this year is we're trying to keep things as consistent as possible for the students and for you. And so what you'll notice is when you look at the deadlines and things like that, you know, that mid-January deadline for students to apply, that's still there. The June 1st deadline as being the earliest date by which we can compel a student to reply, that's still there. So we're trying to keep all of the time points and all of the dates and the deadlines consistent, because we really find that there is already a lot of change within the sector, within the system, and there's a lot to keep up with in regard to sort of the ever-changing nature of COVID and different restrictions and things like that. So what we're trying to do from a sector perspective is keep the things that we can keep consistent, keep those things consistent, just to try to help you folks out a little bit more. And so you'll see that, you know, our offers of admission are the same as they've been in previous years. They contain the offer, they contain the scholarship. They also contain our guaranteed offer of residence. You know, we don't know what fall 2021 will look like. We don't know what residence is going to look like in fall 2021. We have our fingers crossed that we will be able to see everybody in real life, but we don't really know. But even the fact that we don't know, we're still, you know, in that hopeful spot. We're still sending out offers of admission in the same way that we always have. So that gives you, I think, a little bit of an overview of sort of where we're at in terms of timing, in terms of averages, in terms of advice that we're giving to students. So I hope that covers some of the things, but of course, happy to answer any questions that you folks have. I know that some of you have put things in the chat. You can also raise your hand, or you can even just type the word question in the chat and then unmute your mic and ask your question in that way if you don't want to go through the whole effort of typing it out. So happy to answer anything that has come up for you folks in these opening weeks of the school year.
And it's kind of unbelievable to think that next week is November. There's so much apprehension about getting the school year started, and then suddenly we're looking at November and the first quadmester in history being done, essentially. So moving right along. You can put up your hand to ask a question, to use your voice if you wish, or you can put something in the chat. I think we've been doing pretty well there to answer those questions. Okay.
Clearly, I'm that amazing. Can I just confirm with Jennifer that I answered your question for your student who's fixated on the grade 12 mark, the French grade 12 mark? You can, yay. Okay, awesome.
Yeah,
thanks.
Looks like you're good to go.
Okay.
Okay. So if there's any more questions that come up and you're wondering, we're happy to pass them on to Jen later if you don't ask them now. Oh, actually, we do have one here from Jeffrey, so you can go ahead with that one.
So the first transmission is actually closer to the end of November. I think it's November 20th. Hang on, let me just double check my sheet here. So our understanding is that we would actually have grades. So November 20th is the deadline for the UAC to receive all midterm final grades for 4UM courses from Ontario schools. So yeah, that's the deadline. November 20th is the deadline for you folks to report to the UAC, and 27th is the target date for us to receive those grades from the UAC. So I believe we will have two completed final grades for students who are in that quad 1.
So given that, Jen, would students expect to see offers before that point, or would you need to see those?
So, before November?
before that?
Before that November 20, I doubt it. We're still trying to figure out when we will start. In a typical year, we will start making offers in the early part of December. Those will be the first offers that we will make, and so that will likely be the case this year, that will happen. And then the second question about when can we realistically expect PIN numbers to be generated? We just got an email from the UAC last night. And so they are basically what they're saying is that because there's been a sort of a difference of some schools have asked for some schools have opted to print their own pins, and some schools have asked for the UAC to mail pin letters through Canada Post. And so they're in the midst of doing all of those things. And basically, what they are giving us is, I think they're giving us sort of early November as being sort of a pin generation time. So it seems like they're saying November 5th, 6th is when they'll be giving out pins. But having your direct contact with the UAC would be able to give you better timing for your particular school, because they're just giving us a sort of a general update.
Yeah, and that's a good point, because that's sort of re-upping a question that we got last week on the forum. If you weren't here, it was like, how come like everybody's not getting their PIN at the same time, or, and we don't really have any say over that. That's the application center that's generating the PINs at different times for different schools, and every school's having their say. As I mentioned, I have a grade 12 student in a high school in my home, and she was bringing that up last night, that next week they're going to start getting into it. So that would corroborate what Jen said about the 5th, 6th sort of time frame.
I mean, I think it's realistic to believe that, not everything is going to be done and dusted by the 5th, 6th. I think mid-November, just kind of giving everything a bit more of a buffer is probably more realistic. So, if we imagine that students will all have their pins in their hands by mid-November, then we can kind of work the timing from there.
Yeah. All right. Any more questions for Jen? Okay, as I was mentioning before Jeffrey's question, if questions do pop up and you want to pop them into the chat, when we're done, we'll have those. We can pass them to Jen. But know this: we're going to be doing this every Friday. We are, evolving, and decisions are being made a lot on the fly here. But it's an unusual year, and so feel free to join us again next week. Next week we'll be featuring the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences and financial aid. So there's going to be a couple big topics there. And for the people that joined us late, know that the November 7th is going to be our virtual open house again, Saturday the 7th, featuring Arts and Social Sciences, FPA, and the Faculty of Science. All right, so we're putting some links up here. Check that out. We had a really amazing show here today, and for our last session in October. Looking forward to November, and look forward to connecting with you again this time next week. Thanks to our guests again for joining us, and thanks everyone. Have a great weekend.
Stephanie, if you're still on the chat, I can try and answer your question.
I am. Thank you.
Okay, so when you say UAC transmission, what do you mean?
We were told we had to have all of our grade 12 marks, especially for people who are virtual, all their courses in, because our school is going to be transmitting to UAC all of the marks on November 4th. And
okay,
ready for OCAS until the 20th.
Okay, I can barely hear your mic. I don't know if you're far away from your mic, but I think I've got most of your question. Basically, I mean, for me, honestly, I'm just reading from the sheet that UAC gave us. And so maybe what the idea would be to kind of check with UAC, because it says here on what it says here for me for November 5th is deadline for the UAC to receive all electronic student data files from Ontario high schools. And so I think what they want to know is they want to know who your kids are and what they're registered in. And then November 20th is going to be the date for their final grades from the quadmester.
Okay, that makes sense then, because we were told everything had to be up to date for November 4th.
Yeah, and I think that's because they want to know what kids are registered in for the whole year so that when they distribute things to us, that we have all of their grade 12 registration. So that does make sense, but that there will be another entry closer to the 20th about grades, because the 20th says here, yeah, like the deadline for UAC to receive all midterm and final grades available from Ontario high schools. So basically, there's going to be a report near the end of November that says, yeah, that says this is, you know, it's time to report grades, basically.
Okay, thanks so much. I have one last question.
Sure.
We have some students that won't be getting their ENG 4U until the octomester 8. So it's the very last cycle in the year. And if they're applying for a Bachelor of Arts, it's the only prerequisite course that they're taking. And I'm curious how that's going to have an impact on their applications.
Yeah, so what's going to happen is we're going to dip back to grade 11 and hold that and use that grade 11 English as basically as a placeholder until we get that grade 12.
Right, but if you're looking at the money for your awards, you said you might revisit it in July, but you're not sure, but that might be their highest mark.
Yeah, and that's, well, it could be, but we're still trying to figure that out. We're still trying to figure out the whether we're going to revisit for scholarship at the end of the year in July.
Okay, thanks so much for today.
Yeah, no problem. And Sherry, you were talking about a consistent release date for the PINs.
You know what, Jen, I totally understand. Just a sec, I'll turn my camera on so you can see me. Hi, it's good to see you. I totally understand this is completely out of your hands. Like, I get that. Like, this is not something that, you know, you work through. But I do know that you have a strong voice out there in the community and this world. But if there was ever a way that there could be a consistent release date for PIN numbers, I can't even tell you how much stress that would take off you know, the teams in the guidance offices and the kids.
Yeah.
Because what happens is they're all released in different time frames, and then students start worrying, oh my gosh, you know, my friends at this school, they're going to get in before me. And we all know that's not true. Like, and it doesn't matter how many times we tell them, but the number of emails that I've already responded to just on that one topic is crazy. So
and I know this came up last weekend too. Sherry, does it come up in like regular years, like non-COVID years?
Every year it's an issue.
Yeah, so it's not like a COVID thing. It's just like a general panic kind of thing. I said last week when we talked, when we did this kind of Q&A, I said exactly what you're saying, which is like, I can categorically say that it does not matter when you get your PIN. Like, when you apply, like, makes absolutely no difference. And it's like trying to get that message out to students and parents is sometimes like it's an uphill battle.
It is. And it's one that we fight, you know, that's a challenge every year. And I know it doesn't come from you guys, but if there was ever a way to get that message to the team at UAC, if, you know, hey, we're going to release PIN numbers. We're going to mail them all out on this date. That would help. I can't even tell you how much that would help.
I know. And Stephanie, I'm just going to address your question in the chat. You know, obviously we don't have anything that has a deadline as early as November 20th, but I do talk to the director of admissions at Queen's fairly regularly. We all tend to talk, and please, like you guys should reach out, just because this COVID year is a little odd. I mean, in a normal year, kids would have their PIN by, you know, by November 20th or by early November, and they would be able to apply by November 20th to qualify for something that's limited enrollment or whatever. But I think it's reasonable to reach out to Queens and say, listen, are you guys changing this November 20th date because the PIN release is so late? And remember, though, that the admission directors are getting this stuff about the PINs like literally at the same time you are. Like, I did get just that email last night saying this is what's happening with the PIN distribution or whatever. That's why it's still in my inbox, so that I can reference it so quickly. So we're all just kind of learning on the fly here. But I think, so you're, oh, wow, Queens is not changing its dates even for that early application. I got nothing for you. I don't know what's going to happen. I have enough trouble keeping track of my own life, so yeah.
Anyway, thanks so much, Jen. I need to constantly, like, I feel like every opportunity I have to talk about consistency, I need to voice that because it's so important. And I think that it's already a stressful time for the kids that, you know, we're working with every year, COVID or not COVID. And that would just be one thing that we could take off everybody's plate.
No, and I know that if I'm UAC, I'm just imagining UAC's world of trying to get PINs to the entire province. But in a regular year, what I wonder is could they make it consistent by region? So, for example, you know, they might not be able to guarantee that Toronto gets their PINs at the same time as Ottawa at the same time as London, but we might be able to say, okay, like Ottawa gets their PINs in this block, you know, and the Toronto boards get their PINs in this block, and so on and so on. So I will put that question to them and ask them if that's possible. They might tell me that there's some magic reason why it's not possible, but I'll ask. I'll throw it out there.
Yeah, because what happens is then there's not consistency between boards, right? Yeah. And then no consistency between, then there's pressure on, you know, on the guidance teams to go ahead and upload them. Then there's almost like pressure between schools.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's not, it doesn't work.
Yeah. The other thing that I'll just say that I know that has been on the to-do list for UAC for a few years, and I don't know what the status of it is, you know, given COVID and all of that stuff, is actually eliminating the PIN altogether. Finding a way to stream the applicants to the correct application without the PIN. So, you know, that's, I know that that's something that people dream about. So that's kind of out there.
So good. In the meantime, by regions, oh my gosh, that would be incredible.
Yeah.
Right? Yep. That would help my inbox a lot.
I will, I'll bring it up as soon as the next time I meet with those folks and see what they say.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that. And I think it's just kind of every opportunity to voice that. I want to do that.
Although I will say, I think your belief that I have some kind of weight in terms of what I say, I think that is totally wrong, but I will bring it forward anyway.
Well, I just appreciate you bringing it forward.
That's all good.
All right, take care. Have a good day. Happy Friday.
Okay, with that, top of the hour, we're going to shut it down. Thanks a lot, Jen.